This video is brought to you by Patreon provider Drew. This issue with the illumination comes and goes. It's not the battery or the compartment. I think it's internal with the contacts between the controller and the body itself. Drew's going to send this in to hopefully get fixed.
Stop! Stop! No!
Pew!
Thank God you're here. Take me with you. I'm the one man who knows everything. Oh dear! No!
Pew, pew.
Ah!
70 meters.
Pew!
Move out.
Pew pew! Pew pew! Pew! Pew pew! Pew!
So it's got a problem with the illumination. Okay, let's see if that's the only thing. Wink wink, nod nod, say no more. What you are looking at is the SWFA 1:6 HD. This is made in Japan, comes in at around $1,000, weighs 22.7 ounces, and features this lovely reticle that they simply call the illuminated donut. Illumination here on full is very clearly visible in a brighter environment, but as you saw earlier, it does have a problem with flickering. That is, I'm fairly confident, down to solely this model. And as you've already seen, it is clearly first focal plane. However, when we get the magnification to right around there, it kind of looks like the reticle's shifted to the right. Again, I think that's only a thing with this particular version, or at least this particular optic as a whole. More on that very, very soon. With the illumination on full, it is nice and clear. You can easily see where the emitter is, the bottom right. That's where it's the brightest section. But as I change the illumination settings, you can clearly see that it flickers between a couple of them. Like I said, I'm fairly confident it's just the contacts between the dial itself and the body. With that, let's see how these turrets sound. The turrets on this thing are stellar, better than some target scopes. They sound great, they look great, they feel great, but they are really big, and that definitely adds to the overall weight.
SWFA 1:6 HD. Illumination is okay. And now it seems like it doesn't want to fully turn on. There we go. Not always the most confidence-inspiring thing to have happen, but yeah, look at that. It's in. I'm just wiggling it back and forth a little bit. There we go. You know what? The contacts are probably just a little bit dirty. It's stopped doing it, but still not all that confidence-inspiring. But hopefully this thing will track a little bit better than the 6T did. Anyway, this is a full mil scope, and the turrets on this are basically target turrets. So we can go ahead and do a mini box test. I'm lined up basically as good as I can be. Again, looking at my small ass screen, but let's give it a whirl. And I'm just matching up the turrets real quick, because despite how nicely set up this is, it should, oh, holy shit. It's not my setup. I'm grabbing my base and I'm wiggling it around nice and hard. What the fuck is going on? What the fuck? Grabbing the back of the scope. I'm wiggling the scope right now, which is attached to my mount, which is attached to my fixture, and it is rock solid. Now, I'll zoom out. I'll even brighten it a little bit. You can see, grabbing the scope, grabbing the base. We have very little to no play there, which is exactly how it should be. And I'm gonna reset. Actually, let's just play around with the windage. It doesn't look like the windage by itself is doing anything. Oh, you know what that is? That's running out of travel on the windage. Oh, that's fantastic. The windage is running out. And this is basically perfectly set up for a 50-yard zero on a 22 LR. And I've used this exact same setup for every scope since I've set this up. And we are running out of windage. To the right. I don't know what the hell is going on with this thing. Let's just see if the elevation is going to give us any sort of discrepancy issues. It looks like it's favoring the right a little bit, but it's not as bad as it was when we were farther left. Well, if that ain't just perplexing. I don't know what the hell is going on with this windage. So you can see I can jog it to the left very, very far. And then to the right, it stops right there. And we have a lot of play in the turrets. So I don't want to jam this thing up. I don't want to destroy it, but this thing is not doing so hot. At least right now, it looks like adjusting the elevation doesn't affect it that much. I probably don't have it clocked in here 100%, which is why when we go up with it, bringing the reticle down, it does favor that right side of the line. But this thing is running out of windage, which should not be the case. There's something clearly wrong with this scope as well. So I'm over 2 doing this SWFA and the 6T back to back.
Well, that's kind of disappointing. Drew had bought the second hand from a guy and had it shipped directly to me. I had it for a couple weeks, shot with it, used it, did the review, and have told him about it. He is going to be contacting SWFA to have this thing get fixed because why not? Can't sell it knowing that it's damaged, but this is a risk that you take with not just buying used optics, but also brand new optics. Quality control from some manufacturers can be lacking. You know, every once in a while something falls through the cracks and it might be you that's on the receiving end of it. It's just something you have to understand. And all the more reason to pay attention when you are setting up all your gear to make sure that there's nothing that you did wrong. It might be something outside your control, like with this. You know, this thing doesn't want to track whatsoever to the left. So let's say this is a sample size of 1 and see how the rest of it performs. Well, if you paid attention to how this thing transverses the power lines, it's actually very good. There's the illumination problem again. It's got a fairly flat image. But there is one thing that you will notice when you get behind this thing is the field of view through it is relatively small. At 1x at 100 yards, you are going to see 95 feet. Compare that to the SIG Tango 6T first focal plane, also at 1x at 100 yards, you're going to see 106.7 feet. So that's a difference of more than 10 feet, and that is 100% noticeable. However, we don't have that much of the scope body showing when we're perfectly set up behind it with the exit pupil, and that's a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. Another thing that's an absolute pleasure is, despite, the field of view is a little small, the image is extremely clear and sharp. It's also, like I said, flat, so there's very little distortion to it. It's a really good combination. And yeah, the illumination on this thing isn't going to be super daytime bright, but you know what? With the size reticle that it has, and you can clearly see that it gets bright enough, I have absolutely no problems using this. Like I showcased a little bit earlier, the reticle is clearly shifted inside the scope body, so maybe this thing's been dropped, or maybe it was just a problem from the factory. I'm not too sure, but I really hope SWFA pulls through and fixes this for Drew. Our 30-yard power transformer does look a little soft in the early morning light, but it still has a pretty clear image. Again, when you're really going to be using 6x at 30 yards, probably not that much. Instead, at those distances, you're going to be running it probably under 3x. But you might be wanting to run 6x at distances like this. That tree's around 250 and that brick building's around 4. Look at how good this image looks here at 6x. It might not be the largest field of view, which I'm going to do a comparison in just a couple of minutes, but just look how sharp and clear everything is. We have a little bit of chromatic aberration at the very bottom edge of the windowsill, but other than that, it's fantastic. You can count all the bricks on that building if you had the time, and you can't really ask for much more than that. That's actually a good time to also point out this reticle is, it's going to be a desired taste for whoever's going to want it. I myself, am not the biggest fan of it, but if you want a first focal plane 1:6 with target turrets, albeit ones that might not track well in this particular version, but with a decent milling reticle, there's no other real choice. This is it. However, I do really like that center dot, and at lower magnifications with the donut, or as they call it, the illuminated donut, I think it works extremely well in fast shooting. 800 yards here between that power tower in the distance and 30 yards at those power lines, and we have a fantastic using image from very close to very far away. What more ask for? Let me let this field of view live for you a little bit. On the bottom, we have the SWFA. On top, we have the 6T first focal plane. Both of these are at 6x. Both of these were filmed around the same time of day. You can clearly tell from the shadows being cast from that cockloft onto the windows of that building. And you can see many, many differences. The difference at 1x at 100 yards is about 11 foot. At maximum at 100 yards, it's just shy of 2 feet. So at 400 yards, you're talking about a difference of 8 foot, and it's clearly visible here. Not only that, but just take a look at how much larger the image appears on the 6T. But with the 6T, if you didn't see that video, go watch that. You see a lot more of the scope body to be able to look through it fairly clearly. And clear, the 6T does not look that much. It doesn't look anywhere near as good as the SWFA as far as the clarity goes. The SWFA absolutely trounces it. It's also got much better colors. That HD glass really speaks for itself when you're looking at it like this. So just a couple of key things to take note of. I was talking about the field of view, but that isn't what makes a scope good or bad. It's just one of those things that you have to take into consideration. Another thing to take into consideration is light transmission. It's one thing filming and shooting during the day, but what happens if you need to take a shot or you need to look at something, a target, for example, to identify it in lower light environments? Well, with the snap of the fingers, we are going to be looking through this optic, and you can clearly see that the sky through the optic versus not is a little bit darker. The time is around 6:30, tail end of the winter, just before daylight savings time, so it is pretty damn dark out. It's a little bit harder to see with the naked eye as opposed to looking through the camera at this time, so that gives you hopefully a little bit better feel and understanding of what you could be expecting. The illumination is just funky with this optic, but again, I hope it's just a serving size of 1. As we increase the map to about 4x when we transverse the large donut, it doesn't seem that bad, but once we go past that, it looks like it gets a little bit darker. You can't expect much more than this from a 30mm tube with a 24mm front objective. It's just the way it be, but it's still fairly usable. If you're going to be doing more shooting like that, get something with a much larger front objective. Moving into a much brighter environment at my home away from home, you can clearly see it's not only daytime, but it snowed and it was fucking cold, like 10 degrees with a wind chill of probably -10. It was brutal end of the winter this year, and I can't wait to get out of it. Illumination here is going to be a little bit harder to see just because of how bright the overall environment is. Snow makes even some of the brightest illuminations on LPVOs seem a little bit dimmer. We have a nice flat image. You can see it shifts that back berm up a little bit, but it's not as bad as we've seen, but it's not as good as what we've seen as well. It's middle of the road. The reticle is fine considering that you can't really see the illumination during the snow. It's there. It's enough to be able to create contrast on that black berm, so it, again, functions well enough given its size. One thing that absolutely sucks about this optic is the magnification ring. I haven't really brought it up during this review, but it sucks. You need to throw a lever on this thing in the absolute worst way. If you think you're going to be able to twist this real quick, You are completely mistaken, especially in the cold. This thing felt like it was in concrete. Beside that, though, we still have a very wonderful looking image here at 6x at 50 yards. Even in the shadows, you can pick up a lot of little detail, especially those chains. And again, it's just a really good looking image. The HD glass, again, speaks for itself. It is fantastic. It's so slow. Let's talk about more good with this thing, shall we? The Eyebox and the exit pupil are very forgiving. You have about 3.7 inches of eye relief, which feels even larger than that. The 1X you can get really close or really far away from, and it's just supremely nice to get behind. Side to side is a little tight, but that probably also is part to why the field of view or the Eyebox is a little bit smaller because of the field of view, just the way it is. But it's really, really nice. Bumping the magnification up to 4x, and we have a very standard, if not slightly better Eyebox than what we would normally get on most LPVOs, especially first focal plane 1-6s. A lot of the times they start to fall a little short, but this is still very inviting to get behind, and you don't see much distortion to the image. Again, it's fantastic. However, with the 6x, it's going to be tight, but that's with any optic at its maximum setting. You can't expect much more than that. But as long as you have good cheek welds and good muscle memory, you're going to be able to get behind this thing fairly quickly and repetitively with very little issues to speak of. It's very, very nice. I can't believe we're already nearly 17 minutes into this review. I'm going to make this final thought and conclusion segment as short and as sweet as possible. This is a serving size of 1, folks, and that goes for any optic that comes across my bench. This one just so happened to have issues. I hope SWFA fixes it for Drew, so this way, not only can he have an optic that he's going to be able to enjoy and use, which so far he still seems to enjoy it despite all of its shortcomings, but hopefully we can then find out if SWFA's warranty work is as lifetime as they say. So again, don't knock all of the SWFA optics because of this one review. It's probably just this one particular optic, not the entire line. Every SWFA I've ever gotten my hands on has been excellent. So hopefully, again, SWFA can fix this for him. So with all that being said, this is perhaps one of the clearest, glass-wise, first focal plane 1-6 LPVOs I've gotten my hands on yet. I was blown away by how good the image looked, albeit it is a small field of view. That is a compromise that you have to figure out if it's worth for you. I myself would much rather have this optic than the 6T. There, I said it. At least the first focal plane 6T. I'm not talking about second focal planes here. I'm sticking strictly to first focal planes. But this thing is very heavy. And if I wanted a heavy first focal plane LPVO, I'm going with the Trijicon, Credo, or AccuPower 1-8. I like the reticle more on that. The illumination was a little bit brighter, and it just seemed to work a little bit better for me. But the overall fit, finish, and usability of the Trijicon for a little bit extra weight, it's only about 3 or 4 ounces heavier, and it's only about $100 to $200 more. You have still, in my opinion, one of the best 1Xs of any LPVO on the market, hands down, and you have an excellent 8X. They struck such a fine chord with that. It is heavier and a little bit more expensive, but if I was looking to buy, if I was cross-shopping this particular optic with anything else, it would be that one, and I would absolutely hands down go with that. Now, it's not to say this isn't a good optic. If you find one of these used like what Drew did for $500-600, that's a very compelling argument. But again, you have to be of the mindset that you know that you want a 1-6 first focal plane LPVO, and you're willing to sacrifice a lot of the other things, whether it be brightness to the illumination, particular reticle settings, overall weight, view through it, as far as field of view and how much scope body you see. There's a lot of things that go on between a second focal plane and a first focal plane LPVO, and that's just naming a few. So to wrap this up with a nice pretty bow, how does this thing stack up? Well, the HD glass is absolutely 100% the star of this entire optic. It is phenomenal. The field of view is mediocre at best. The external fit and finish and build quality is just typical SWFA. It is fantastic. All the controls are great, with the exception of the magnification ring. That 100% absolutely needs a throw lever. It's just something that you're going to have to take into consideration. It is portly. It does fill a bit of a gray zone as far as the weight versus its capacity, but that's, entirely up to you. I think SWFA did a really good job with this. I really hope that they can fix it for Drew. And once Drew gets word back from SWFA, after it gets fixed or not, I will let all of you know. If you're longtime fans of my channel, whatever happened to my other warranty work optics, such as the Tristan Credo 2 to 10, they did tell me to send it in, but the lead time was going to take several months. And honestly, I just put it in the back burner, and it's been sitting there. I really got to get that sent out. They said it wasn't going to cost anything. Same thing with the Minox ZP5. Once they found out I was not the original owner, they stopped replying to my email. So interesting how that works, but I'm going to have to get in touch with them again because that's a $3,000 optic that's collecting dust. Anyway, Drew, thank you so much for sending this in for review. It's always great to get my hands on SWFA optics, and this was an absolute peach despite its shortcomings. And thank you all very much for watching. As always, hope to see you again next time. And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.